Welcome to the Soul Touched by Dogs podcast, the show for dog lovers who see dogs not as toys or tools, but wise souls worth our respect and care. I'm Anke Herman, and I'm your host. I talk to pawsome humans, people who do great work for dogs and their people. So come and join us for today's conversation. Hello and welcome, Cindy. I'm very excited to have you here.
It's great to be here. We've had a little chat pre conversation and it's been fun. So I'm looking forward to the rest of it.
And the rest will be just as much fun. I always love sort of hitting record when we're just having a giggle. So let people know, where are you based in this lovely world? And if you got a question, what's your business with dogs?
Well, I love that you're in the world and that. So I'm going to tell people I live near Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is the north part of the heart of the United States. So if you look at our state license plate, it says the land of 10,000 lakes, and there's actually 12,000 lakes in the state of Minnesota. So we have a lot of nature. Minneapolis is a big city, but it's easy to get out into nature. And having dogs through my married life and living here has been wonderful to get out and explore.
Oh, that's so beautiful. To be honest, I moved away from the city so that I have more space and, for the dogs and myself as well. So, so tell me about, what brought you here? So what's your involvement with dogs? Because it's not just you have your own dogs and that's it.
No, it's been a journey. As a kid, I loved animals. And that at that point, we had a family dog and then we had a family cat. And I had a bed load of stuffed animals that I would have to arrange at night and rearrange in the morning. So I was just always in love with dogs. And during my senior week of college, so senior week being almost graduating, I found a dog. And I lived on campus and a friend lived off campus. So that friend kept the dog, but we couldn't find this dog's home. And after graduation, I ended up taking the dog with me. I was staying in the community. So I took the dog with me and tried my best to find its owners and did everything I could, working with the rescues. And they finally said, "You've been fostering this dog. It's up to you now. Do you want to keep this dog or turn it into the shelter?" And at that point, as you know how it is with dogs, I was already smitten with this dog, and there was no way I was going to send, his name was Snuka. I was never going to send Snuka to a shelter. So Snuka came home and lived with me. I didn't have any equipment for a dog. So our first walks were, I even laugh when I think about it. I had an extension cord. That's what I had to take him on a walk. But he didn't need a leash. And he would walk with me. We started walking around the block, and pretty soon we were walking 3 miles every day. And I was in love with this dog that took me out into nature, and he loved being with me. And when I met my husband, it was only going to work if he and the dog got along. So, and yes, they got along really well. And Snuka was the dog to which all other dogs will be compared.
Oh.
And just the best dog. He would love to sit in the front yard and watch the traffic go by, the people go by, never ever left, never ever wanted to leave my side. So once he found me and we created that connection, that's what went on. But that rescuing, that just hooked me in. And my husband, Joe, and I lived at one time in Michigan, on Lake Michigan, on the beach. And when you live on the beach, you find lots of crazy things, that animals in trouble. And so we were rescuing dogs and cats and ducks and mergansers. And not that Joe took it all in. He was always helpful, but it became something that I wanted to do. And it wasn't so much the rescue, it was just taking care of that animal. But I can't say that wasn't the thing that got me going. But what really got me going is we had Snuka, we had the kids, and my kids were early in their teens. Our second dog's name was Sierra, and Sierra died suddenly, unexpectedly, sent us all into a tailspin of grief. And it was really hard because when Snuka died, it was just me and Joe, and my daughter was so tiny at the time, she didn't really understand. But now I had all four of us managing, trying to deal with this grief. And something was amiss with the kids. And I couldn't put my finger on it. It was just massive tsunami of emotions with this grief. And the only thing I wanted to do was go back to the happy days. And when I suggested we adopt another dog, then the next round of fighting began, because the years earlier when we had gotten Sierra and everybody was on board, this time around, nobody's on board. Everybody was like, this is the dog I want, and this is the dog I want, and nothing was the same. So a friend suggested try fostering. And the more I looked into it, here I'm thinking, that's perfect. We're going to solve this problem. We'll have a parade of dogs. We'll have all this happy energy in the house. And I won't have to choose between which dog and making it look as if I am favoring one kid's choice over the other. So I thought this was my out.
Oh, that makes sense.
I thought it was my out for making a tough decision. And so we started fostering. And then
I was just thinking, and how did that go? Because that's not that easy either, right? So,
well, foster dog number one comes in, and he's a little, we call him Pocket Pet, and his name was Poet. So Pocket Pet Poet. And my younger daughter was in love with Pocket Pet Poet. So when it was time for Poet to be put online for adoption, that was the next round of fighting, because we realized at that point they weren't through their grief from the dog, from Sierra dying, and now I'm asking them to give up this dog. So I know logically what it means to win in fostering, and that means you give up the dog and open your home to another one. So that's the win, is you have to lose in order to win at fostering. But nobody in our family was ready for that. So we adopted Poet. However,
yeah, that's what I'm not. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yep.
and there's always a big however, right? So the next however is that the older teen wanted her dog. If the younger daughter gets her dog, older daughter gets her dog. Well, of course, now the second dog that we go to foster is this beautiful flat-coated retriever, flowing hair, the retriever tail, black. She's a black dog, beautiful almond, soft eyes. And she walked into our home as if she knew us. And she was just wiggly and so happy to be with us. And there was no way I was giving up that dog.
Foster I would be.
So that was foster failure number 2. So we say foster failing when you adopt your own foster dog instead of adopting it out. So now I have 2 resident dogs and a commitment to foster a minimum of 6. So instead of having 1, I now am juggling 3. And that's when I learned real quickly what my limits were. So we were going along, we started fostering dogs, but what I noticed is that the kids weren't necessarily improving from that kind of click, or that part of grief that we got when Sierra died. And we were just going through this kind of tumultuous time. They were teenagers, things were changing. I remember what it was like to be a teenager. So we started noticing things with the kids, and their grades were slipping and their behavior was changing. We were getting calls from school, and we started to talk with their physicians, our medical community, and found out, we did some extensive work with the kids and evaluations, and both of the kids ended up with ADHD and anxiety. So now we were into this whole thing at home of medication trials and all the different things to try, and processes and things at school, and working with teachers and counseling and family counseling, kid and individual counseling. And that's when people would say to me, why are you still fostering? Well, in the end, as hard as and difficult it is to balance all that and then balance 3 dogs, the dogs were just teaching us all these lessons. Caring for the dogs together as a family was keeping us together. Yeah. So at this time when the kids were spiraling out of control for all the things that they were going through, we had this family activity right there in our house. And we got to see all this great connection. And so that parade of dogs that I originally wanted was doing what I had hoped, just in a different way or for a different reason.
I love that. And, and I know what you mean. Like these 4 of mine, and I mean, they've never all been together. So there's always been 3, between 2 and 3. So, but I think 3 days, all of a sudden, are quite a different dynamic for sure. And, the thing that I always associate with fostering, as beautiful as it is, like I love when somebody can do it, because it is that, you find a home for one, so you can take another one in, so, but it's almost like 1,000 little deaths, right? So it's like,
well, and that's this whole fostering has taught me that as I talk to people, so I started writing a book. My whole idea about writing a book was how to inspire more people to foster. And that ended up, and that book hopefully will be out this fall, and it's a little bit different slant on that. But in this whole thing about fostering, I don't know how many people, when I'd say I foster, would say, no, I could never do that. I couldn't give them up. And I'm just discovering that I think a lot of us have a hard time with grief, and we don't know how to manage it. And that's what all these years of foster dogs. So we have fostered 25 dogs and about 26 cats now. And each time it's hard, but then there's a logic that comes with it.
Yeah. So how long on average, is there like a specific, like how long is a dog with you when you're fostering? Because I think that also makes a difference. Like, see, I'm like, just because I would be totally, we talked about, I'm totally one of these people who goes like, oh my God, I couldn't, then again, I'm thinking, okay, I've looked after my friend's dog, for, when she was away, so I've been looking after her dog for 3 weeks, and, loved the dog to bits, and I didn't struggle giving her back because I knew she went back to her person, so it's almost like, first of all, the time period, it's not 6 months, like, so there was a shorter time period. And I also knew for sure that she was going into her home, or like if I know for sure they're going into a great home, well, maybe I could, right? So how long on average is an animal with you?
There really is no average. It just depends on the dog and oftentimes the circumstances. So when Margot came into us, big Margot, the big flat-coated retriever, she was already spayed. She was in perfect health, and we could have turned her around and put her out on the web probably within 2 or 3 weeks to get an idea of what her personality was like. Because one of the key things as a foster and being in your home is you're going to write a profile about them. Do they like men? Do they get along with kids? Do they get along with cats? So that people can get a better idea of, they fall in love with the picture. It's almost like real estate. They fall in love with the picture, but then you want to know the story is, does the rest fit with your home? And that's the beauty of fostering, is they've been in a home. If they like to walk, do they like to run? Do they like to play ball, snuggle, all those things. And so at a minimum, usually 2 to 3 weeks. But then sometimes, depending on the type of situation a dog has been in, if they've become hugely fearful because of or separation anxiety, it may take longer. Poet was a tough dog. Poet came to us, he was 3 years old, had never been neutered. He had a lot of house issues, and had we not adopted him ourselves, he probably would have stayed within us as a foster for a number of months. So there's different ways to foster. Yesterday, I was volunteering with somebody who fosters fearful dogs, and those dogs, he said, usually stay with him for a year and a half.
Wow.
So he takes about a year to get them where they need to be, and then it takes another 6 months to find the people. Whereas I just had a foster cat that he went out the door in 2 weeks. So
and do you find there is a relationship between, like length of time fostered and kind of risk of foster failure? I mean, do you find that the longer the dog stays, the more, are there any numbers, like the more likely it is, or is it just sometimes the connection and sometimes you just know it in an instant and it doesn't matter?
I think it's the connection. And in the beginning, it is hard to give up. I'm not going to say it isn't. I mean, we had Poet and Margot because it was really hard for me. And you have to let that problem solving and that ability to say no come forward. And one of the things another foster and I were talking about that she loves and that she wishes people would understand, especially as you go into retirement, as fostering's perfect because you get to have the animal, and it's almost like grandparenting. You get to have the animal, and then they go off somewhere else, and you go do your activities, you go travel, and then when you're ready for the animal again, you have it, and you don't have to worry about where the animal's going to go while you are on vacation, or who's going to care for it, and what's going to be like when you come back. So the more you foster, the more you realize, this is kind of nice. You get all the feels of being with a dog. They move on. And what's fun at that point, when you have created that connection, it's not only creating a space in your home to take in another animal, you've just matchmaking.
Yeah.
You watch this love blossom, and people send pictures. They love to send you pictures and keep me engaged in what's going on in their life. And in the beginning, there's a lot and maybe a few over the years, but you get to watch this animal fall in love, in the family fall in love with the animal. But that, like for me now, the next kind of realm I'm into is working with other fosters who are new and struggling. Oh, could I give them up? And will they be okay? And part of that learning to be okay is trusting yourself that you've done a good job with the animal. You've done a good job screening the people that you're working with and feeling confident and comfortable saying yes and letting go.
I was just about to ask you, like, do you get a say or, in where the animal goes to? Because I think for me personally, that would make a massive difference. Like if I know that this dog, if I know that person or have a sense of that person and I'm like, this dog's gonna have a great life with that person, I think that's much easier to let go of than if you're a little bit like you don't know how it's turning out. Do you, like, how much of a say do you have in where the dog goes?
Usually the foster has a lot of say. Most fostering goes through some rescue agency, and many of them have different ways in which they screen the people that are interested in adopting an animal. So the rescue I work with, they're like my helicopter parent. They know what questions to ask to make sure people are responding as honestly as possible. So really, if you can get that connection going with people and asking questions and a conversation, because the more people talk, the more information you get. And then you can start weighing, am I seeing red flags and feeling uncomfortable? And that's part of the process too, is just getting enough information from somebody else through a conversation to test your own trust. How is this feeling? So it really develops your intuition. But I'm fortunate in that the rescue I work with, they pre-screen, so nobody gets to me until they've been pre-screened, and pretty much at that point saying they seem to fit our mold. So we're going to pass them on to Cindy and let her do the final screening. And then there's always that meeting them in their home, having them come to your own home to see how they are with the animal, the dogs.
I mean, does it happen sometimes that something like doesn't work out and then you get the dog back, or does it then go to a different foster, or like, does it happen? I mean, I guess it would.
I have only had it happen twice.
Okay.
And in both of my situations, it was a failure on the adopter to disclose some information. And that information tended to relate to mental health issues. So in one case, it was a family that was getting a dog for a mother. And she came with glowing recommendations. She was an animal massage therapist, but she had moved into dementia. And it wasn't a pretty dementia. And they were hoping that having an animal would calm her, and it was just creating more struggles. So once we worked through that, and then the same thing happened with another couple, is that they wanted it for their elderly mother and they were going to take care of it. And when they finally got to that moment of it's taking care of her, there's a lot of recognition that has to come along in this process when it's mental health, and who's going to take care of an animal. Is taking care of your parent as they age is a lot of work, and it's hard for some people to accept that until they actually get into it. So in those cases, the animal came back into the system. We had within our rescue, we did have somebody who the animal went out, and that's when they discovered that one of their kids had a severe allergic reaction to fur. And so they couldn't be around the animal, and it had to come back. And it, nothing that they were trying to hide or anything like that. They just didn't know until it happened.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, it's a fascinating world. It feels like it's this crash course in intuition and psychology and personal like self-awareness, and you really kind of get to know your own emotional reactions in a whole new way, because it's just really it's not just a transaction, right? There's that, you've got that connection and you've got to manage it and appreciate it. Yeah, I just find it fascinating. So where can people connect with you, find out more about? Could people contact you if they may be considering fostering and they're not going to have questions and not quite sure, or where can people find out more about you?
I'm open to conversation, because the more we can help people get through that hump and find other fosters to get into it, even questions about adoption. But I write a weekly newsletter on the platform Substack, and my newsletter is called Like People Like Pets. And it's not just about fostering, it's about all the different ways that animals and humans enhance each other's lives. But I do talk a lot about fostering there. And so people can certainly get a hold of me through that method. And it requires a subscription to read it. I'm sorry. But the subscription is free. So it's a click of a button, and no big deal from there. And that way people can talk to me directly.
I love that. Thank you so much. Obviously, if you're listening on the podcast, it's in the show notes, and if you're watching it in the newsletter, it'll be just below, above, wherever you're watching us. Thank you so much, Cindy. This was enlightening, and I think it kind of, like what you shared and how you shared it, really sort of takes the kind of sadness out of the idea of fostering. So I think you're doing brilliant work. So I'm super happy that you came along today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun getting to know you, and I'll be waiting for your call about fostering.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so other dog lovers can find the show. If you haven't already, head over to soultouchedbydogs.com and sign up for weekly doggy cuteness, tips, recommendations, and personal stories to warm your dog-loving heart. And if you know a awesome human you think I should interview, I'd love an introduction. Email me at Anke, that's ANKE, at soultouchedbydogs.com.